Welcome to The Waggle, the official podcast of the Canadian Football League.
The Toronto Argonauts have clinched a playoff spot.
It's a complete team. We're coming together, so it's really good to see us kind of gelling at the right time.
We should see these teams meet again. Will it be here or will it be in Calgary in the postseason?
That's right. It is the Waggle podcast brought to you by us here at the CFL and CFL.ca. I'm Donovan Bennett. He is Enoch Mwamba. He can't stop winning. They can't stop winning. The Argos are on a wave, and guess what? It is the right time because there are only five weeks left in the CFL regular season. Let's break down the games and break down some crucial games with some huge playoff implications. Let's do this, Enoch.
Let's do it. Let's get going.
Ooh, where do you start? Maybe a game for me that was a little flat. Montreal and Hamilton started the week. Montreal wins 23 to 16. Ticats led for much of the game. I don't even really have much to say about them in the notes because they didn't play poorly. Dane Evans didn't have a bad game. They didn't turn over. They didn't find a way to lose in some disastrous fashion. But I think this conversation for me is about Montreal. Coming off a bye, they were 0-2 coming off byes going in. They win the season series, most importantly, against Hamilton, which puts them 2 games up in the standings. And, third really is essentially last in the East because it looks like we'll have a crossover team. But Trevor Harris, again against Hamilton, plays his best football. 5 TDs in 3 games against the Cats this year. 5 games this year with multiple TD games. And I think he's the barometer for me for the Owls. If he's on and he's right, they're a tough team to beat. And if he isn't, and he's Leonardo or Raphael in the pocket, kind of ducking because the pressure's there, then they're pretty ordinary. Is that fair to say?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely correct, DB. I think that Trevor Harris, they're gonna go as far as he takes them. And when Trevor Harris is at his best, he gets the ball and he releases it. He knows exactly where to go with the ball, and the offense flows a lot smoother and better. And that's what it looked like when they were playing against the Tiger Cats. And so it's hard for me to ever cheer for the Tiger Cats, but I kind of wanted a little bit of separation with the Montreal Alouettes. But hey, you know what? Every time the Tiger Cats lose, every Toronto Argonaut fan is happy. But at the same time, yeah, you're right. The Montreal Alouettes had a really great showing. They came out. They seemed to be prepared. They were ready against the Tiger Cats. And like you said, the Tiger Cats didn't necessarily play bad, but this is one of the things that happens when, you're just right now trying to figure out how to win, right? You're not used to having to do it together throughout the regular season. They've been going through a lot of stuff over there, changing quarterbacks and I'm sure changing schemes because you're changing a quarterback and their different abilities and whatnot. And so now you're going back to a guy who you committed to at the beginning of the season, but, you won the previous game. But, hey, look, you find yourself in a situation where you're away. There's things that are happening that you're not necessarily prepared for. And it's hard to adjust if you haven't been there for a while. And so, they go and they fall to the Montreal Alouettes in Montreal, and in a game that, like you said, it was tough. They didn't play necessarily too bad, but they couldn't find a way to win the game, and it cost them a game and a huge one, like we talked about with the playoff implications.
We talked about young guys finding their way in the league, figuring out how to win. I think it's a great example would be Kiondre Smith. Son of Pee Wee Smith, the Guelph Griffin alum, had a real nice start to his career, although it was not a great week, hasn't been a great season for the Guelph Griffins in the OUA with only 1 win thus far. But Smith had his first TD, a bomb last week from Dane Evans. Get the yin and yang with the young receiver. Critical drop that would have been the go-ahead TD, and then fumbles to end the game. When you got a young player with promise, but he's got to catch up with where the program is. What do you say a young guy who you're going to need, not even in the future? You need him in terms of what their skills look like right now to make plays and fast track their situation.
No, absolutely. Kiondre is one of those guys that could help him tremendously. But at the same time, you just can't skip the process, DB. You can't skip the process, and you have to go through these games and these growing pains that, yes, they do suck in the moment, but at the end of the day, you gain that experience that is so valuable and so necessary in order for you to become that player that you could potentially could potentially become. Now, here's the thing, though. Those plays happen. He made a couple of mistakes in a huge and critical game, but the truth is, it's only Kiondre Smith that can make the difference going forward. It's only him that can find the way to get the right mental approach to the game in order for him to become that player that we all expect and think that he could become. And so, the fight is really mentally for him. And at the same time, what the Hamilton Tiger Cats can possibly do as far as the coaching staff, as far as management, is surrounding with the right people around, as far as teammates, but also give him the right amount of encouragement and push him forward in order for him to become better week in and week out, so that when the time comes and they dial up his number at that point, he will be ready. But the Hamilton Tiger Cats have a few players like that. They found one as well in their running back Hales. I mean, they made a huge change in taking out Don and putting in Hales back there. And the last couple of weeks he's been playing extremely well. But again, this is one of those things where, look, he just got on the team and just started to play. So maybe the offensive coordinator over there, Tommy Condell, doesn't understand exactly what are the things or which plays he likes the best and he's more comfortable with and whatnot. And so it's just one of those things where, you know what, they haven't had enough experience as a team. They're not gelling. And that's what I could see when I'm watching the Hamilton Tiger Cats play.
Well, you know who didn't skip the process? The playoff-bound Toronto Argonauts did not. Have made the playoffs, secured a spot. You are in the tournament, first in the East right now. And it's remarkable because, one, they won a couple cups not that long ago, but two-thirds of the league makes the playoffs. But the Argos haven't made the playoffs in back-to-back years since 2012, 2013. It's essentially a decade ago. But now we're seeing that sustained success. And defense sets the table for all our friends who have watched the program. 42 points off turnovers in the game against Ottawa. Macbeth now wins 4 games straight for the first time in his career. He's top spot in the league in terms of passing yards. It all came together against the Ottawa REDBLACKS in a 45-15 beatdown. When you hear kind of where the program is, ticket punched for the postseason, so first goal that you make on day one of training camp, crossed off, some consistent play from Macbeth. You talked about the defense taking the ball and gifting it to the offense. Well, defense scored twice, but also put the offense in positions to score. What's the biggest thing for you in terms of the catalyst based off of all the superlatives I just gave you that I'm not going to hear the end of it?
Well, you talk about the history of a franchise, right? And we find ourselves at this, particular moment in time where, yes, we can't ignore the past. We can't ignore what has happened. But at the same time, we have to be conscious about the fact that we are here, we are now, and we want to make a difference. It has nothing to do with what's happened in the past, and we're here. And so obviously with Pinball at the helm as the general manager and Dinwiddie, we feel like and we understand that it's really year 2 of this new regime, if you want to say, and we're confident that we have the opportunity and we have the guys in the locker room to cause some damage across the league. And so going forward, we just want to be confident in the things that we've done in the past. And to be honest with you, one of the things, the messages that I continue to preach in the locker room and as one of the leaders and multiple others do the same as well, is just the simple fact that we just can't be satisfied. We can't get complacent where we are. And, quite frankly, DB, between you and I really believe and I truly believe that, we haven't reached our maximum potential yet for our 2022 season. Now, we know and we understand that, hey, look, for us to win as a team, we have to continue to play great defense. And, we continue to challenge ourselves. Coach Mace keeps putting out different challenges going forward. And RD, has been putting us up a challenge for the last month, really, for us to just be locked in and focused on the moment at hand. And he literally started, I think it was since our last loss, he said, hey, guys, let's go 1-0 going forward. And since he's been saying this, it's been literally 4-0, and that's what we keep talking about. And so it's about really understanding where we are at in the process, where we are at, with this new regime and, where we want to go and not being complacent. So that's where we stand. And, we're happy where we are, but we're not satisfied, and we want to continue to push forward.
Well, the Ottawa REDBLACKS in their process are not happy or satisfied, and they are on the other end of the spectrum in terms of franchise building. This was a proud franchise. You could argue that they had a popping vibe in stadium. It was a tough place to play, fun place to watch a game. They had not one. Arguably, they had two Hall of Fame quarterbacks on their team, with Henry Burris obviously leading them to a championship, and then they couldn't wait to get Trevor Harris and get him the keys to the franchise. And then when it came time to renegotiate, they kind of said, we can replace you. And he took his talents west. Since then, it's been a revolving door at quarterback. It still doesn't seem to be solved. Paul Appolice was supposed to be the quarterback whisperer to bring in someone who's going to develop at the position. Well, you've got, the original GM and coach who led them to a championship no longer there. They lost 20 of the last 21 games at TD Place. So that amazing atmosphere was tough when you're getting beat down every time you come to Lansdowne. And in this game, I think it's a microcosm of where they are. Their QBs threw 5 interceptions, 6 total turnovers. Arbuckle was yanked for Evans at half. Evans was eventually yanked for Arbuckle because he was arguably worse. And Paul Appolice, a guy who hates turnovers, his team's turning it over in big ways, and they failed to score a TD. When you look at Ottawa and where they are in critical positions, you're looking for something to build off of, and it seemed like they had a little bit of momentum, but it's almost like they took 4 steps backwards. What's your appraisal where they go now that their playoff hopes are in doubt, not just mathematically, but based off of the product we see on the field?
Look, when you look at a franchise like the Ottawa REDBLACKS, right, and having been in the pros for the last 11 years, and I've seen the highs, I've seen the lows. I've been a part of rebuilding teams. I've been a part of successful teams and whatnot. But I like to take a step back when I want to analyze a team like this. So you got to think about, okay, look, this is really year one. Once again, the tough part is, look, as a fan, you just remember the losses. You continuously remember how many times, every time I come to the stadium, I see a loss. It's been 2 seasons, it's been 3 seasons, but what you don't understand is all the moving pieces that happen, that make a huge difference. And so you have to take a step back and understand that this is year one. I know there's been a lot of disappointment, there's been a lot of losses, but this is year one of, Sean Burke. He's put together a great team. Unfortunately, this is, just how the game goes. He was confident. They were confident in, Jeremiah Masoli leading them to a great season this year. Obviously, things happen. It's football. It's a game of football, and you got to be ready to replace and replenish and sometimes even change directions. But that's what they had to do this year, and there was a lot that happened. That's not an excuse for them. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to find the positives, even in the things that, happened this year. Look, you have Lorenzo Malden out there, who is the leading, defensive lineman as far as sacks is concerned in the CFL. You can't take these things for granted. You have a great linebacking core, a really good D-line, and then you have, Ackland, who had a pretty good season, regardless of how they are doing when it comes to the standings and when it comes to wins and losses. And so you have to be able to take those positives and continue to highlight them. One of the things that I've observed and that I've seen over the years, when you look at a team that is one, if you want to call it rebuilding or you want to call it struggling, what seems to happen quite often is, look, boom, there's going to be a change in coaching staff. There's going to be a change in defensive, coordinator, offensive coordinator. And then you get to see a whole bunch of new players coming in. And to me, when I look at the Eastern Division and the Western Division, I often look at the stability and continuity that you find in the Western teams compared to the ones that you find on the Eastern teams. And so if the Eastern teams really want to find success down the road, yes, again, I come back to not skipping a step in the process. There are going to be growing pains. It's really about finding a way to fight through this storm that feels like it's the end of the world, but yet remaining and keeping the right pieces. While, yes, it's inevitable, there are going to be changes that are going to happen. There's never been a team, regardless of how successful you have been in a season, that remains the same year after year. But at the same time, having a good beat for the locker room, understanding who are the leaders and who are valuable and important to a locker room is extremely important for a general manager in order to move forward from a year like this year for the Ottawa REDBLACKS. Now, for us as fans and for people watching the games and you see and you kind of expect, hey, Ottawa REDBLACKS this next game and the rest of the season is probably completely over. These games mean quite a bit when you're thinking about the future of this franchise, whether it's just the coaching staff, but really just the players. This is when I want to see the character of a man, the character of a player. Are you the type of person that I can have in my locker room that is going to help me get over the hump? And really, I'm observing you for the remainder of the season, the last 5 weeks, like you talked about at the top of the show. Who do I have in my locker room? And who am I going to keep going forward? So these are extremely important games, regardless of playoffs this year or not. You got to have, a vision for the future when you're watching a team like this one.
Well, you talk about the stability, two franchises who, have had that stability, Calgary and BC, but they're actually breaking in quarterbacks that they didn't start the year with. Obviously, Jake Mayer for Calgary has taken over is a starter for Bo Levi Mitchell, but Vernon Adams is trying to get things going, as Nathan Rourke is injured. And it was two different scenarios. Mayer, 27 to 34, real efficient, 294 yards. Vernon Adams ran for his life, 4 sacks. And I wonder, this is an offensive line for BC that looks so good, keeping Nathan Rourke clean. And all of a sudden, it's a different cadence, different guy, different portion of the year. And it looks like the Mike Riley offensive line that put him in retirement. Is it, the 5 guys up front? I know they've had some moving pieces. Or does a new guy back there, make a difference in terms of what that protection looks like?
Of course, things can never be the same, right? You put a guy like Vernon Adams, who has his own style of playing, back there, and you change a Nathan Rourke and you put a VA back there. It's never going to be the same, and it's unfair. It really is unfair for anybody to try and compare Nathan Rourke to Vernon Adams and his performances compared to Nathan Rourke, because you got to remember Nathan Rourke. Possibly, most likely, this offense was predicated and built to make him comfortable, and he fitted exactly and perfectly. That might not be Vernon Adams' style, and this is when really great coaching comes into play. So when you look at an offense like the BC Lions and how they've been performing, I think maybe the first 5 weeks of the season, I kept screaming at you, DB, about how fast of a release Nathan Rourke's, balls get out of his hands. And so when you think about that, there's no offensive line that is necessary really to stop any type of D line. I remember playing against BC Lions early on in the season, and we were telling ourselves, like, I don't know what to do. We don't know what to do. When we're blitzing them, the ball's getting out, and they're so accurate, and he knows where to go with them, and the receivers were making plays for him. And so the more he progressed, the better he got, and the more the defense, the game started to slow down. He started to take more risks, hold the ball a little longer, but he still had that ability to get the ball and release it right away. Now, when you look at a Vernon Adams, that's never really been his MO. That's never really been the way that he plays the game. And so he wants to get the ball. He wants to stand back there. And remember, this is a guy who has been criticized over the years prior to him even being a starter, because it used to be said about him that all he does is run. And now, after a few years and he's matured, he's understood how to stand and sit in the pocket. Now you're asking him to get the ball, let go of it, or run. And so it's a lot going on that, to the naked eye, you might not understand. But, they got a lot to figure out right there in BC in order for them to go forward. And, they don't have much time because, like you keep talking about, playoffs are quickly approaching.
Yeah, they don't have much time at all. They got to figure out offensively. Held to 11 points or less 2 of the last 3 games. And, Nathan Rourke, he ain't walking through that door anytime sooner. If he does, he's going to be walking with a limp. He's just now weight bearing. So it's still going to be some time. And, Brian Burnham, the real number one receiver in that offense for me, contested catch guy, fractured wrist. He also is going to miss some time. So not a great time. And in Calgary, wins the head to head. BC, though, both teams with 9 wins has a game in hand. So they could secure second, if they have more wins outright. Obviously, no one is catching Winnipeg. And shout out to Dave Dickinson, as we talk a little bit about Calgary. Gets the victory, his 100th of his career as a head coach, which is a lot, in a league where you play, 18 games, all with the same franchise. And we're talking about, accolades. I want to give some love to Ka'Deem Carey. So we talked about Bo Levi Mitchell, and we talked about obviously what Mayer is doing, and that defense certainly in Calgary deserves some love too. But Ka'Deem Carey, keeps that defense fresh and makes it second and manageable, keeps the offense on schedule for Mayer as a younger QB. He's a CFL rushing leader, rushing TDs in 3 of his last 4 games. I cursed 2 individuals earlier by saying, watch out for them for M.O.P. So I shouldn't do it, but I'm going to do it. Is there a chance that we see Ka'Deem Carey wearing a tuxedo and a bow tie, representing the West in M.O.P. in the Grey Cup this year, given that the leader in the clubhouse, Zach, although the team's running away with things, isn't going to be playing much meaningful football down the stretch, and had some games where he played well, but statistically, weren't crazy.
I mean, it's going to be tough. I'm glad I don't have, I don't get to make these decisions, but the decision makers usually, typically, when you have a team that has been dominant, as the Winnipeg Blue Bombers have, with only 2 losses in a whole season, and who knows how many more, regardless of who they choose to play going forward. But they are going to take that into consideration. But I can't put it past them. I think Ka'Deem Carey has been having an amazing season, and he's been playing tremendously. I personally have not played against him yet, but I know I was literally a couple of days ago talking to, my defensive coordinator who just came from, Calgary, and was letting me know, hey, he actually is the real deal. And so obviously I trust in him. I've obviously seen enough on film as well as on TV, the kind of damage that he can cause within a game. So, he is really the engine that keeps him going. And the truth is, now there's really no debating. I mean, you took out your Hall of Fame quarterback, and he is still able to be as effective within games. And so it wasn't necessarily Bo Levi Mitchell that was making him great or making him better. He was probably making whoever is at quarterback, he is making better. And so, he's that kind of guy. He's that kind of player that, demands a lot of attention from a defense. And because of that, it allows for that team to be able to get a lot of stuff going in the perimeter and, makes for sure 1,000% Jake Maier a lot more comfortable back there.
From coast to coast, to east versus west, it's time again to let them know what more you've got.
10,000 yards.
More will, more skill, more leave it on the field. Because it's win or go home. So let them know. This year, you'll be raising more than the bar. The chase to the Grey Cup is on. Let them know.
Well, your wish is my command. You're saying you didn't get to see him? Well, guess what? You're going to get to see him this week. Let's transfer to the games coming up this week as we preview the action. But to set the table on what these games mean, we got to go through the schedule and the standings, specifically in the West as we look at the road to the Grey Cup. Winnipeg, as you mentioned, that dominant team, 12-4. They've already punched their ticket. BC now 9-4, again, a game in hand. Calgary 9-5, right behind them for third in the West. Both of those teams clinched a playoff spot, and they can finish no worse than a crossover team. So they'll likely face each other in the first round of the playoffs. But either way, they're in. The playoff crossover team right now is Saskatchewan at 6-8. But again, their arrow hasn't necessarily been trending up. So maybe an East team might be able to catch them. And Edmonton, 4-10, has lots to work to do. In the East, Toronto doesn't have to worry about crossover, 8-5 in sole possession of first place. Only team in the East with a winning record and clinched a spot. Montreal they might be able to make a run because they've got some games against your Argonauts. They're 6-7. They got that 2-game lead over Hamilton, so it looks like they'll be hosting a playoff game somewhere at some point in the East. And Hamilton's got work to do. 4-10. They got to bye this week, so they got to go on a real run to get back into the playoff conversation. In Ottawa, 3-10. We talked about them. Many of them will be playing for next year in jobs next year. And it starts though this week, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, out west. Winnipeg coming off the bye, hosting. Always nice to get a home game off that bye where you don't have to go anywhere. Saskatchewan goes to Winnipeg, also coming off of a bye. Let's be honest, Saskatchewan needs a win. And Winnipeg coming off a loss against Hamilton. So this will be a real interesting one, but it'll be a real important one because our official, Brian Krupolo, will be announcing penalties in this game in Ojibwe. And both teams will honor National Day of Truth and Reconciliation on Friday. It is a national stat holiday on the 30th. So when we talk about diversity of strength, that's going to be real cool. And it's the first time I'm going to be looking forward to hearing a penalty call during a football game. But hopefully the game is relatively clean. When you see Saskatchewan going to Winnipeg, what do you think about that matchup?
It's going to be a tough matchup, right? But the level of desperation that Saskatchewan has to play with is going to be what I'm looking for, is what I want to see. Now, you got to remember, they have hope. They have, the opportunity to cross over, and they need to start getting wins together. They got to start gelling. They have to start to understand one another and figure out really what's going on over there. Because at the end of the day, look, you don't want to get into the playoffs and get booted out in the first round, right? And that is the kind of stuff that happens when you're not ready, when you're not prepared, and you don't exactly know you don't have an identity. And so it's going to be interesting to see. And one of the things that I mentioned last week, specifically with Winnipeg and the situation that they find themselves in so early, clinching everything already and having such a great season. Now the dilemma comes with the curse, at least with this great gift of having finished so early and having had such a great season is, Michael Shea, who do you play? Do you rest guys? Do you play guys? Do you play guys half games? And, if anyone sprains anything going forward, they're going to look at their coach. They're going to think about to themselves even, like, man, I didn't even have to play that game. But again, this is one of those games. Football is a game that you can never play halfway to full speed. You have to play full speed every single time. And so I hope, or at least the biggest thing that, every Winnipeg fan has to think or has to want is for everyone that steps on the field, regardless of if you're a starter, you're a usual starter, or you have become the starter for the week, you have to go full speed 100%. And that's everyone that's on the field. And so they have a great culture over there. But again, the question, at least what I'm going to be looking for, going forward with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers is going to be the type of decisions that the coaching staff and management is going to make as far as who gets on the field. Shout out to Willie Jefferson, who's a good friend of mine, and his wife, Holly, who just received their new baby, Riley. So if you're the coach, do you give him a little break? Do you tell him to hurry up and come back? We need you on the field. All of that plays, a role. I mean, he has a house. They already have, another daughter, Kelly, and Riley now. Hey, do I want to keep him at home a little bit? Do I want to tell him to, hey, come back and work? These are all the decisions that they have to make, right? But you wouldn't even be thinking about it if you hadn't finished and clinched every single clinchable, position that you could clinch in the CFL season. And so it's going to be interesting going forward. But I'm excited to see what's going to happen over there.
The question is, what does Willie want? Because he might be like, hey, coach, not only do I want to play, I need this. I can say, hey, listen, honey, I know it's tough. I got to sleep in the other room. Got a big game. We there's no half stepping. We don't want to trip on our way to the playoffs. So, I'll see you in December. But either way, congrats to Willie and the entire family on the new addition. I mentioned first game on Friday. We'll have something special, to commemorate and show respect to our Indigenous communities here in Canada. Same thing is true for the nightcap, Friday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Ottawa at BC. BC, under their new ownership has been first class, top to bottom, and this is no coincidence. BC Place hosting an Indigenous marketplace pregame, and they're not stopping there, honoring Indian Residential School Survivors Society at halftime. And what the RRSSS is, they provide essential services to residential school survivors, their families, and anyone dealing with intergenerational trauma based off of what's happened to the first inhabitants of our land. So that's really important. Shout out to the Lions for once again being leaders in this space. They're hoping to lead the game. Tough one for Ottawa. Road trip all the way across the country to BC after a tough loss. They're not out of the playoff picture, but BC still trying to keep pace with Calgary, and so this is an important one. I do not think this will be a trap game like it was for some others against Ottawa earlier in the year. When you think of this game on Friday, what comes to mind?
Well, you know what? Ottawa now has to realize and understand that I talked about really where they stand as far as their jobs and their job security and really their future. And so, it's about a mentality that you need to have. And regardless of, hey, I'm playing for playoffs or not, I have to put my best foot forward every single down and every single play. And it's easy as a coach to see who really cares about the game of football. And you'll hear this often if you stick around at the pro level enough, you'll hear coaches, what they really want from players are the players that really care about the game. And when you put yourself in a situation like Ottawa REDBLACKS have this season, now the only thing that matters is not even a Grey Cup, really technically, right now. It's not a playoff seed. It's not about really winning the game anymore. It's really, do you care about the game of football? Do you care enough that you will put your best foot forward regardless of what's at stake? Do you care enough for the man next to you? And that's really what's going to matter going forward, regardless of what we've talked about and regardless of what you're striving for this regular season. And so, you understand you're going to week in and week out now until the end of the season, they're going to be going and they're going to tell themselves, let's go wreck it for this team that we're about to play. That's going to be the model. That's going to be their mission. And they're going to do that as they go to BC. And, BC is just that team that is mid-season. They had to change, their personnel, and they have to find themselves. And so this is a great game for them. And, they have to figure out what works, what they like best, how they can make Vernon Adams comfortable back there if they choose to continue to commit to him going forward. How can they make him, better? And you know what? Even more than that, to me, how do we utilize his abilities to, maximize on his potential? At the same time, we've talked quite a bit, a few times on the show about these running quarterbacks and how they can get hurt. But it's about a good enough balance of running as well as passing, and which is something that Vernon can do. And so it's about figuring out exactly how do we make him comfortable and how can we allow for the personnel that is around him to succeed in protecting him, but also in being successful when it comes to games.
Well, it's a similar story in Edmonton this week for guys playing for the man next to them and some personal pride. They're also playing in a tough place to play for them at home, where they've struggled to get a win and haven't got one at home this year. They got Montreal playing for a playoff spot, again, trying to secure a playoff position, secure a home game, and potentially chase the Argos for first place. This one will be an interesting one, especially as Montreal trying to gain some room and some breathing space from Hamilton, as Hamilton is idle this week. Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern, Alouettes at Elks. What comes to mind when you think of this game?
Go, Elks, go. Go, Elks, go. I'm going to be sitting watching this game and cheering for Edmonton. I don't care what anybody says. I think that every other, Toronto Argonaut fan is going to be doing the same thing. We just want to get out there, cruise into the playoffs, and understand exactly where we'll be. Even get a first-round bye, we would love that. And so they'll need to win that game. But at the same time, now, Montreal cannot take the Edmonton Elks lightly. I think they're one of those teams that when you talk about wrecking teams and messing up the playoff, hopes. That's one of the teams that can do that for any team in the league. I don't care what the record says right now. They found a quarterback in Cornelius. They paid the quarterback in Cornelius. Where I would love to see him run a little bit less, because when he runs, I tend to always think, okay, when is the hit coming? And so, if I'm Chris Jones, I'm telling him, hey, look, you got the check already. You have nothing to prove. You are the guy. And now you also have a responsibility to take care of yourself when you're running. But when he is in the game, and if he remains healthy, they always have a chance. Cornelius is one of those guys where, and with his height, I think he's 6'5", and long legs, he can get around, and I've seen him outrun angles. And that Chris Jones defense, you just never know when it's going to click, and you never know when Chris Jones is going to dial up, the blitzes that he has and everything that he has in his repertoire. And so they are a very dangerous team, regardless of, whether they're making playoffs or not. And so I'm hoping that danger comes into play this week as they play the Montreal Alouettes. And, if you're not an Alouette fan, you got to think trap game. You have to think trap game, because I was talking to some Alouettes guys, this past week, especially after they won and we won. And, they're sending me messages and saying, hey, just to let you know, we are coming for that number one spot. And, again, they cannot overlook the Edmonton Elks this week.
Well, I believe everything that you just said, except for the fact that you'll be watching this trap game, because you won't. You'll be listening to some trap music in your headphones, because you're playing that night, 7 p.m. Eastern. You're going to get ready to play at McMahon in a rematch. The game that was one of the best of the year. Calgary wins 22-19. It was the game that brought us Jake Maier as a starter. Your defense is who the rest of the league can thank for that. But a game that, quite frankly, the Argos probably should have won a couple times. Now you go into McMahon, historically a tough place to play. Still a tough place to play. Question one. Question two, is the Jake Maier you're seeing now on the doorstep of October the same one you saw in the middle of the summer?
I don't think that the Jake Maier we're seeing now was the same one that we saw earlier. I think he's improved tremendously, and the one thing that you can never take away from him is the experience that he's gained, going through all these games as the unanimous starter. So no, he's definitely improved, and he's playing some great football. And anytime you got a great running back in Ka'Deem Carey beside you, running the ball the way that he has, it's always going to make you look even better. And so as a whole offense, as a whole team, they do a lot of things very well. And even historically speaking, whoever was at running back in Calgary, what they've always done really well when it comes to the scheme, schematically speaking, they always do a really good job of blocking and of doing better. They've never been really, when I think back of every time that I've played the Calgary Stampeders, they never really had one individual player when it comes to at least offensive line that is extremely dominant. But when they play together, and they usually play together, they're extremely tough to beat, and they do things a lot very well. So, having that behind them, the foundation that they've built, the culture that they've had for years over there in Calgary, and plugging in Jake Maier, well, look, they have a good chance of going forward and improving week after week, and Jake has been doing that as well. So we're excited for the challenge, and we understand exactly how important these games are. And like I said earlier, we're happy with where we're at. We understand we clinched playoffs, but that's not what that's not all we set out to do this season. And, we want to keep going forward.
Both teams in the postseason, both teams looking to make sure that they start the postseason at home. Should be a good one. Appreciate you, listening, favoriting, liking, sharing, subscribing. If you haven't done any of those things, please do. We do this for you. And we've also done another piece, and I mentioned earlier, Friday is National Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada. So please spend the day, reflecting, listening, and learning about the truth so that we can all reconcile. But, Dane Evans is helping us do that. We did a beautiful feature with him where, he's been engaged in the First Nations community in and around Hamilton. He himself has Native American roots, and so he explores those roots, meeting members of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Six Nations community, and maybe he tried his hand at a little lacrosse. Dane Evans might be a two-sport athlete, but check that out. It's going to be on our YouTube page on Friday. A lot of hard work went into it by the CFL team, so looking forward to getting you engaging on that piece of content as well, and spending the day on Friday doing what's important. That's listening and learning, because no matter what happens on the field, we always want to remember as a league that diversity is our strength. Enoch, you're always a great example of that. Thank you for dragging me through this episode. Looking forward to dragging down Ka'Deem Carey on the weekend, my friend.
Stay tuned in, baby.